Jake was having one of those days where everything felt boring. College was the same routine every day. Wake up, go to class, study, sleep, repeat. He was 24 years old, working on his language studies, and honestly feeling pretty lonely. His apartment was quiet. His phone barely buzzed with messages. And most evenings he just sat there wondering if this was all there was to life. That Tuesday evening, Jake decided to go for a jog. He wasn't much of a runner, but he needed to get out of his small apartment. The air was crisp and cool, and the woods behind his building looked peaceful in the fading sunlight. He put on his old sneakers and headed out, thinking maybe some fresh air would help clear his head. The jogging path wound through tall pine trees, and Jake was starting to feel a little better. His breathing was steady, his legs were finding a rhythm, and for the first time in days, his mind felt quiet. That's when he saw the strange glow coming from deeper in the woods. At first, he thought maybe someone was camping illegally back there, but as he got closer, the light seemed to bright, to white, almost like looking at a star up close. Jake slowed down, his heart beating faster now. Not from running, but from something else entirely. Curiosity maybe, or fear. He couldn't tell. Which he pushed through some thick bushes and stopped dead in his tracks. There, in a small clearing, was something that definitely didn't belong on Earth. It looked like a vehicle, but not like any car or plane he'd ever seen. The metal was smooth and curved, almost like it was grown instead of built. Parts of it were cracked open, smoking slightly, and there were strange symbols carved into its surface that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. Jake's first instinct was to run. His brain was screaming at him to get out of there, call someone, pretend he never saw anything. But then he heard it, a soft sound, almost like crying, coming from near the crashed object. He took a step closer, then another, his hands shaking slightly. That's when he saw her. She was lying on the ground near the wreckage, and Jake's breath caught in his throat. She looked human, sort of, but different in ways that made his mind struggle to process what he was seeing. Her skin had a pale blue tint to it, like moonlight on water. Her hair was silver white and seemed to catch the light in ways that regular hair just didn't do. She was wearing clothes that looked like they were made from fabric that shifted color when she moved, but it was her face that really got to Jake, even unconscious. Even clearly hurt, she looked peaceful, beautiful, but in a way that was completely foreign to anything he'd ever seen. Her features were delicate, almost ethereal, and there was something about her that made him want to help. Rather than run away, Jake knelt down beside her, his hands hovering uncertainly. Should he touch her? Was she dangerous? Was she even alive? He could see her chest rising and falling slowly, so she was breathing. That was something. But there was a cut on her forehead, and what looked like burns on her arms. She needed help. That much was clear. "Hey," Jake whispered, feeling a little stupid for talking to an unconscious maybe alien. "Can you hear me?" No response. Jake looked back toward the path, thinking about his options. He could call 911. But how would he explain this? He could just leave her there. But the thought of that made his stomach turn. What if she died? What if she was someone's daughter, someone's friend, from wherever she came from? Jake made a decision that would change everything. He carefully slipped his arms under her, surprised by how light she felt. She was warm, which was somehow reassuring. As he lifted her, she stirred slightly, making a soft sound that might have been words in a language he didn't recognize. The walk back to his apartment felt like the longest 10 minutes of Jake's life. He kept expecting someone to see him, to ask questions he couldn't answer. But the evening was quiet, and he managed to get to his building without running into anyone. Getting her up the stairs was tricky, but he managed it, fumbling with his keys while holding her carefully. Jake's apartment was small and simple, just a living room, kitchen, bedroom, and bathroom. He laid her down on his couch, grabbing every pillow and blanket he could find to make her comfortable. Then he sat in his chair across from her, just watching and waiting, not sure what else to do. That's when her eyes opened. They were unlike anything Jake had ever seen. They seemed to shift color, starting as a pale green, then becoming more blue. then almost silver. When she saw him, she didn't seem afraid, just confused. She tried to sit up, wincing from her injuries, and Jake instinctively moved forward to help her. "Easy," he said softly. "You're hurt. You're safe, though. I'm Jake." She looked at him with those incredible eyes, her head tilted slightly like she was trying to understand. Then she spoke, and her voice was like music. The words were completely foreign, flowing and melodic. But somehow Jake could tell she was asking a question. "I don't understand," Jake said, feeling helpless. "Do you speak English? English?" He pointed to himself. "Jake, English." She watched his mouth as he spoke, her expression intense with concentration. Then she tried to copy him. "English," she said slowly, her accent making the words sound like a song. "Jake." Jake felt a weird thrill hearing his name in her voice. "Yes, Jake, that's me." He pointed to her. "You?" She touched her chest and said something in her own language, a word that sounded like flowing water. Jake tried to repeat it but couldn't get close to the right pronunciation. She seemed to understand his difficulty because she thought for a moment, then said, "Zara, Zara." Jake repeated, and she smiled. It was the first time he'd seen her smile, and it was like watching the sun come up. "Nice to meet you, Zara. Though I have to say, this is probably the weirdest introduction I've ever had." She didn't understand most of what he said, but she seemed to pick up on his tone. She looked around his apartment, taking in the furniture, the books on his shelves, the pictures on his walls. Everything seemed to fascinate her, like she was seeing things she'd never imagined before. Jake realized he was staring at her, and he felt his cheeks get warm. "Are you hungry?" he asked, making eating motions with his hands. "Food?" Zara watched his gestures and nodded. Jake went to his kitchen, which was really just a corner of his living room, and started looking through his cabinets. "What did you feed someone from another world?" He settled on making some soup and toast, figuring those were pretty universal comfort foods. As he cooked, he kept glancing over at Zara. She was examining his coffee table like it was the most interesting thing she'd ever seen, running her fingers over the wood grain with wonder. When he brought her the food, she looked at it cautiously, then tasted it carefully. Her face lit up with surprise and pleasure. "Good?" Jake asked. "Good," she repeated, and then said something in her own language that he took to mean the same thing. They ate together in comfortable silence, and Jake found himself relaxing for the first time since he'd found her. There was something calming about her presence, something that made his usually quiet apartment feel less lonely. But as the evening wore on, reality started to sink in. He was harboring what was obviously an extraterrestrial being in his apartment. She was hurt, possibly stranded, and completely dependent on him. He had no idea what to do next. No idea if she was dangerous or if there were others looking for her. All he knew was that she seemed gentle, grateful, and more lost than threatening. Jake looked at Zara, who was now curled up on his couch, looking tired but more alert than when he'd first found her. She met his eyes and said something softly in her language, her tone warm and thankful. Even without understanding the words, Jake knew she was expressing gratitude. "You're welcome," he said, and somehow he meant it more than he'd ever meant anything in his life. As the night deepened and Zara's eyes grew heavy, Jake realized that his boring, lonely life had just become the most extraordinary thing he could have imagined. He had no idea what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in months, he was actually looking forward to finding out. The next morning, Jake woke up on his bedroom floor. He'd given Zara his bed and tried to sleep on the couch, but every little sound she made had him jumping up to check on her. Around 3 in the morning, he just grabbed his pillow and camped out on his bedroom carpet where he could hear if she needed anything. Sunlight was streaming through his window, and for a moment, Jake wondered if the whole thing had been some crazy dream. Then he heard soft humming coming from the kitchen, and reality hit him all over again. There was an alien in his apartment, and she was apparently making breakfast. Jake stumbled out to find Zara, standing at his stove, somehow managing to cook eggs despite never having seen a modern kitchen before. She figured out how to turn on the burner and was carefully pushing the eggs around the pan. with a wooden spoon. Her movements were graceful and precise, like she was performing a dance. "Good morning," Jake said, his voice still rough from sleep. Zara turned and smiled. That same radiant expression that had caught him off guard the night before. "Good morning, Jake," she said carefully. Her pronunciation was already getting better. "You didn't have to cook," Jake said, though he had to admit the eggs smelled amazing. "You're still recovering." She looked confused for a moment, then seemed to understand. She touched her forehead where the cut was already looking much better than it had 12 hours ago. "I am better. Thank you for—" She paused, searching for the word. "For helping." Jake felt his heart do a little flip. "You're welcome. How are you feeling?" "Feeling," Zara repeated, testing the word. Jake pointed to himself. "I feel tired, sleepy." He yawned to demonstrate. Then he pointed to her. "How do you feel?" Understanding dawned on her face. "I feel grateful." And she paused, looking frustrated that she couldn't express herself properly. "Different. This place is different." They ate breakfast together, and Jake found himself fascinated by how Zara experienced everything. She examined each bite of food carefully before eating it, like she was studying it. When Jake turned on the radio, she froze completely, her head tilted toward the sound with wonder. When a song came on, she looked around the apartment like she was trying to figure out where the music was coming from. "It's a radio," Jake explained, pointing to the small device on his counter. "Music from far away." "Music," Zara repeated, her eyes wide. "From far away." She seemed amazed by the concept. Jake spent the morning trying to teach her basic English while learning about her at the same time. She was incredibly quick to pick up new words, but some concepts seemed to confuse her completely. When he showed her how to use the bathroom sink, she understood the water part easily enough, but she kept looking around like she was missing something. "Where are the others?" she asked finally, her English already improving by the hour. "Others?" Jake wasn't sure what she meant. Zara gestured around the apartment. "Others? Like you? Where?" "Oh," Jake realized. "I live alone. Just me." The look on Zara's face was pure shock. "Alone? You live alone?" "Yeah, lots of people do. It's normal here." Jake felt a little defensive. "I mean, I have friends and stuff. They just don't live here." But Zara looked genuinely distressed. "That is, how do you say wrong?" "Wrong?" Jake frowned. "What do you mean wrong?" Zara struggled with the words. "My people, we do not live alone. Never alone. It is." She touched her chest, looking pained. "It hurts to be alone." Jake was starting to understand that this wasn't just about preference. "You mean it physically hurts?" "Yes. Body needs others." Like, she looked around his apartment, then pointed to a plant on his windowsill. "Like plant needs sun. Body needs others close." This was getting more complicated than Jake had expected. "So where you come from, everyone lives together?" "Yes, always together. Sleep together. Eat together. Work together. Never alone." Zara looked around his empty apartment again. "How do you not hurt?" Jake thought about it. "I guess I do hurt. Sometimes. I get lonely. But I just deal with it." "Deal with it?" Zara looked confused. "I mean, I just accept it. It's part of life." Zara shook her head firmly. "No, not part of life. Life is together." As the day went on, Jake noticed that Zara seemed to be getting more tired instead of better. She was still learning English quickly, still curious about everything. But there was something different about her. Her skin looked paler, and she kept sitting closer to him. Whenever they were talking. By evening, Jake was getting worried. "Are you okay? You look tired." "I am." Zara paused, searching for the right words. "I am not sick. But I am not well." "What's wrong? Are you hurt? Are your injuries worse than I thought?" Zara shook her head. "Not hurt. I am empty. Inside empty." Jake didn't understand. "Empty how?" Zara looked frustrated, clearly struggling to explain something that had no equivalent in English. "My people. We have connection. Always connection. When alone, connection breaks, body becomes weak." "Connection to what?" "To others. To family. To." She touched her chest again. "Two hearts that beat together." Jake felt a chill. Are you saying you're dying? Not dying, but becoming less, like plant without sun, but slow. Jake ran his hands through his hair. This was way beyond anything he knew how to handle. What do you need? How can I help? Zara looked at him for a long moment, then seemed to make a decision. In my world, we sleep close, very close. Bodies touch. This makes connection strong. Jake felt his cheeks get warm. You mean like sleeping in the same bed? Yes, but not. She struggled with the concept. Not for pleasure, for health, for life. I don't understand the difference. Zara thought for a moment, then pointed to his water glass. You drink water for life, yes? Not for pleasure. You need water or you die. Right. Same for my people with closeness. We need others. Close or we. She gestured vaguely. We fade. Jake stared at her, trying to process this. So you're saying you physically need someone to sleep next to you? Yes, not just someone. Someone who. She paused, looking for the right word. Someone who cares. Connection must be real. This was definitely not something Jake had prepared for when he'd found her in the woods. And if you don't have that connection, I become weak. Mind becomes slow. Body becomes sick, eventually. She shrugged sadly. Jake looked at Zara, really looked at her. She did seem different from yesterday. Less vibrant, less present. And suddenly he understood why she'd been sitting closer to him throughout the day. Why she seemed to perk up whenever they were near each other. So that's why you've been staying close to me. Yes, your presence helps. A little, but not enough. Jake felt a weight settle on his shoulders. This wasn't just about helping someone recover from an accident anymore. This was about survival. And somehow, he'd become responsible for keeping this extraordinary being alive. What exactly are you asking me to do? Jake asked quietly. Zara met his eyes. I am asking if you will help me not fade away. I am asking if you will let me sleep close to you so I can stay alive. Jake looked at this incredible person who had fallen, literally, into his life. She was asking him to cross boundaries he'd never even thought about, to be responsible for another being's survival in a way that felt both terrifying and profound. I need to think about this, Jake said finally. Zara nodded, understanding. I know this is strange for you, but Jake, she reached out and touched his hand gently. I do not want to fade away, and I think you do not want to be alone anymore either. Jake felt something shift inside him as her words hit home. She was right. He didn't want to be alone anymore. But he also didn't know if he was ready for what she was asking. As night fell, Jake watched Zara curl up on his couch, already looking smaller and more fragile than she had that morning. He went to his bedroom and lay there staring at the ceiling, knowing that his answer would change everything between them. The question was he brave enough to say yes? Jake barely slept that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he could picture Zara on his couch, looking smaller and more fragile than she had just that morning. Round 4 in the morning, he gave up trying to sleep and went to check on her. She was awake, staring at the ceiling with those color-changing eyes that now seemed dimmer than before. When she saw him, she tried to smile, but it didn't reach her eyes like it had before. Can't sleep either? Jake asked softly. Sleep is difficult, Zara said. Body knows something is wrong. Jake sat down in the chair across from her. Zara, about what you asked me yesterday. She sat up slowly, and Jake could see the effort it took. You do not have to say yes, Jake. I understand this is strange for your people. It's not that it's strange, Jake said, though it definitely was. I need to understand exactly what this means. For both of us. Zara nodded. What do you want to know? Well, first, how does it actually work? This connection thing. Zara thought for a moment. My people have special cells in our skin. When we are close to others, these cells wake up. They help our bodies work better, help our minds stay clear, help our hearts stay strong. And it has to be while sleeping. Sleep is when the connection is strongest. When minds are quiet, bodies can focus on healing and growing stronger. Jake ran his hands through his hair. And you're saying I could help with that? Even though I'm human. Yes, you're caring for me. Your kindness, it creates a bridge. My cells. Respond to genuine care, not just to my own people. Jake felt a warm flutter in his chest at the word caring. How do you know I care? Zara's smile was gentle. Because you brought me home. Because you fed me. Because you are here now, in the middle of the night, worried about me. Jake felt his cheeks get warm. So if we shared the bed, what would that be like? We would lie close together. I would probably hold your hand or put my head on your shoulder. Small touches that create connection. Nothing more. And that would help you? It would save me, Zara said simply. Jake looked at her pale face, at the way she seemed to be fighting just to stay alert. What would happen to me? Would it affect me somehow? It might help you too. Humans are more like my people than you think. You also need connection. But you have learned to ignore the need. What do you mean? You told me you feel lonely, yes? That you hurt sometimes from being alone? Jake nodded. That is your body telling you it needs connection too. Most humans just push down the feeling instead of listening to it. Jake thought about all the nights he'd lain awake feeling like something was missing. All the times he'd felt empty even when he was surrounded by people. So this might actually help me sleep better. It might. But Jake, I want you to know, you do not owe me this. I am grateful for what you have already done. If you say no, I will understand. Jake looked at her. This incredible being who had crashed into his life and turned everything upside down. What happens if I say no? Zara's expression grew sad. I will get weaker. My mind will become cloudy. Eventually, I will fade away completely. How long do you have? Maybe a week, maybe less. Jake felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. That's not much time. No, it is not. Jake stood up and started pacing. This is crazy. This whole situation is completely insane. I know. I mean, 3 days ago, I was just a normal guy living a normal life. Now I'm responsible for keeping someone alive in a way I never imagined. Jake, Zara said softly. And I don't know anything about relationships or sharing space or Jake. He stopped pacing and looked at her. You are not responsible for me. You saved me once already. That was enough. This choice, it must be yours. Not something you feel forced to do. Jake sat back down and really looked at her. Despite everything, despite being weak and scared and far from home, she was still thinking about his feelings. You're not forcing me, but I am scared. What scares you? I don't know how to be close to someone. I've always been better at keeping people at a distance. Why? Jake was quiet for a moment. I guess because it's easier if you don't get close. To people, they can't hurt you when they leave. But you are already close to me, Zara said gently. You were close to me the moment you decided to help me. Jake realized she was right. Somewhere in the last 2 days, he'd started caring about her more than he cared about anyone in a long time. I just don't want to mess this up. There is no wrong way to care for someone, Jake. There's only trying or not trying. Jake took a deep breath. Okay, let's try. Relief flooded Zara's face. You are sure? I'm terrified. But yes, I'm sure. That evening, Jake prepared for the strangest night of his life. He changed his sheets, cleaned his room, and tried to calm his racing heart. When bedtime came, he and Zara stood awkwardly at the edge of his bed. How do we do this? Jake asked. However, feels comfortable for you, Zara said. There's no right way. Jake got into bed first. Lying on his back and trying to look relaxed, Zara climbed in beside him. Moving carefully like she didn't want to startle him, she lay on her side facing him, keeping a small distance between them. Is this okay? She asked. Yeah, this is fine, Jake said, though his heart was beating so fast he was sure she could hear it. They lay there in silence for a while, both of them clearly too nervous to sleep. Then Zara spoke softly. Jake, may I hold your hand? Jake looked over at her, even in the dim light. He could see that her color was already looking a little better than it had that morning. Yeah, okay. Zara reached over and took his hand in hers. Her skin was warm and soft, and Jake felt an immediate sense of calm wash over him. It was like his body had been holding tension he didn't even know was there, and now it was finally releasing. How do you feel? Zara asked. Good, Jake said. surprised by how true that was. Really good, actually. How about you? Better already. The connection is working. Jake could feel it too, though he couldn't explain what it was. There was something happening between them, some kind of energy or warmth that seemed to flow back and forth. It wasn't romantic exactly, but it wasn't just friendship either. It was something deeper, something that felt ancient and important. Zara. Yes, thank you for trusting me with this. Thank you for saying yes. Jake felt Zara's breathing slow down as she started to fall asleep. Her hand was still in his, and he could feel her pulse. Steady and strong. For the first time in years, Jake felt truly peaceful. As he drifted off to sleep, Jake realized that maybe he'd been wrong about keeping people at a distance. Maybe the scariest thing wasn't getting close to someone. Maybe it was realizing how much he'd been missing by staying alone. When Jake woke up the next morning, Zara was still beside him, her head now resting on his shoulder. She looked completely different. Her skin had color again, her breathing was deep and steady, and she looked more alive than she had since he found her. Jake realized that helping her had helped him too. He'd slept better than he had in months, and he felt more rested and content than he could remember feeling in years, maybe. Jake thought as he watched Zara sleep peacefully, some risks were worth taking after all. 3 weeks had passed since that first night, and Jake's life had completely changed. Every morning, he woke up feeling more rested than he had in years. Zara was thriving too. Her color was vibrant, her energy was back, and her English was getting better every day. What had started as a medical necessity had become the most natural thing in the world. Jake found himself looking forward to their evening conversations before bed. They would talk about everything: his studies, her homeworld, human customs that confused her, and stories from her people that amazed him. He was learning that Zara was not just beautiful and kind, but incredibly intelligent and funny too. One evening, as they were getting ready for bed, Zara seemed quieter than usual. Jake noticed she kept starting to say something, then stopping. Herself, everything okay? Jake asked as they settled into bed together. Zara took his hand like she did every night, but this time she held it a little tighter. Jake, I need to tell you something about why I'm really here. Jake felt his stomach drop. What do you mean? I told you my ship crashed. Yes, but that was not completely true. Jake sat up a little, turning to face her. What really happened? Zara took a deep breath. I was not supposed to be here. My ship did not crash. I ran away. Ran away? From what? From my people. From my home. Zara's voice was quiet, almost ashamed. I was exiled. Jake felt like the world had shifted under him. Exiled. Why? My people have many traditions, many rules about how we should live, who we should connect with, what we should believe. I started to question these rules. I thought some of them were wrong. What kind of rules? Zara was quiet for a moment. We are told that we can only form deep connections with those who are exactly like us. Same community, same beliefs, same everything. But I believe that connection could happen between any beings who truly cared for each other. Jake understood now, and your people didn't like that idea. No, they said I was dangerous, that my ideas would destroy our way of life. So they gave me a choice: stop speaking my thoughts, or leave forever. And you chose to leave. Yes, I took a small ship and left to find a place where I could belong. Your Earth was supposed to be just a stopping point, but when I entered your atmosphere, something went wrong with my ship. It was damaged, and I had to land quickly. Jake felt a mix of emotions: sadness that she had been rejected by her own people, but also something else. So you can't go back? No, even if I wanted to, which I do not. They would not accept me back. Jake was quiet, processing this information. So you're stuck here? I prefer to think of it as free here, Zara said with a small smile. But yes, Earth is my home now, if Earth will have me. Jake looked at her, this incredible being who had been cast out for believing in exactly the kind of connection they had found together. I'm sorry your people couldn't see how amazing you are. Thank you. But Jake, this means something important for us. What do you mean? It means I'm not going anywhere. This arrangement we have, this connection we share, it is not temporary. If you want it to continue, it could be permanent. Jake felt his heart speed up. Permanent? For my people, when we share this kind of bond with someone, it is for life. We become family. In a way that is deeper than your human families, we become essential to each other. Jake stared at her. Are you saying we're already bonded? Like, permanently, the bond is forming. Yes, every night we spend together makes it stronger. But it is not complete yet. You still have a choice. What choice? You can choose to complete the bond, or you can choose to end it now before it becomes permanent. Jake's mind was racing. What would completing the bond mean? It would mean we belong to each other, in the deepest way possible. Not as ownership, but as two parts of the same whole. Your happiness would matter to me as much as my own. My well-being would matter to you as much as your own. And if we don't complete it, Zara's expression grew sad. Then we would have to stop sharing this connection. I would have to find another way to survive, and you would go back to your life as it was before. Jake felt panic rising in his chest. The thought of going back to his old life, of sleeping alone, of not having Zara's presence in his world, felt impossible now. How long do I have to decide? Not long. The bond is almost at the point where it will complete itself, whether we choose it or not. How will I know when that happens? You will feel it, like something clicking into place inside your heart. Jake realized he could already feel something like that happening every day. Zara became more important to him. Every day, the thought of losing her became more unbearable. Zara, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you want to complete the bond? Zara's eyes met his. Yes, more than anything. But only if you want it to. What would our life be like? I mean, how would this work practically? We would build a life together. I would learn to live as a human, and you would learn to live with someone who truly understands connection. We would take care of each other, support each other's dreams, face challenges together. Would other people understand? They do not need to understand. They only need to know that we care for each other deeply. Jake thought about his life before Zara, the loneliness, the emptiness, the feeling that something was always missing. Then he thought about the last 3 weeks, waking up happy, feeling understood, having someone who genuinely cared about his thoughts and feelings. I'm scared, Jake admitted. Of what? Of making such a big commitment, of changing my whole life, of not being good enough for you. Zara shifted closer to him. Jake, you saved my life. You welcomed me into your home and your heart when you could have just called the authorities. You have been kind and patient and caring every single day. How could you not be good enough? What if I mess it up? What if you don't? Jake looked into Zara's eyes, those beautiful, color-shifting eyes that had become so familiar and dear to him. You really want to spend your life with me? Even though I'm just a regular human guy who doesn't know much about connection or relationships. Especially because of that, Zara said softly, you have the purest heart of anyone I have ever met. You care for others without expecting anything in return. You are gentle and thoughtful and brave. Those are the qualities that matter for a true bond. Jake felt something warm spreading through his chest, and he realized this must be what Zara meant about feeling the bond click into place. I think I love you, he said. The words coming out before he could stop them. Zara's face lit up with joy. I love you too, Jake. More than I ever thought possible. So what do we do now? Now we choose it together. Jake took both of her hands in his. I choose you, Zara. I choose us. I want to complete the bond. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Zara's smile was brighter than any star Jake had ever seen. Then we are bonded. For life, as Jake held Zara close that night, he felt the last piece of the connection snap into place. It was like his heart had found its missing half, like his soul had found its home. For the first time in his life, Jake felt complete. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new questions about how to build a life together. But tonight, Jake was exactly where he belonged, connected to someone who understood him completely. Committed to a love that transcended worlds. 6 months later, Jake barely recognized his own life. What had started as a chance encounter in the woods had become the most beautiful relationship he could have ever imagined. The bond between him and Zara had grown stronger every day, and Jake finally understood what it meant to truly share your life with someone every morning. Jake woke up feeling grateful, not just content or happy, but genuinely grateful to be alive. Zara had taught him that loneliness wasn't just something humans had to accept. It was actually a signal that something important was missing, and now that he had found that missing piece, everything else in his life had improved too. His studies were going better because he had someone who genuinely cared about his progress. His health was better because Zara made sure he ate well and got enough rest. Even his relationships with other people had improved because he wasn't carrying around that underlying sadness anymore. But it wasn't just about what Zara did for him. Jake had discovered that taking care of someone else, really taking care of them, gave his life a purpose he'd never experienced before. Every day, he found small ways to make Zara happy, and her joy became his joy. Zara had adapted to human life amazingly well. She'd learned to use technology, understand money, and navigate social situations. Jake had helped her get official documents through a friend who didn't ask too many questions. And she'd even started taking online classes to learn more about Earth's history and culture. But there were still challenges. Some nights, Zara would have dreams about her home world, and she'd wake up sad about the family and friends she'd left behind. Jake had learned to hold her during these moments, too. Let her grieve while reminding her that she had a new family now. "Do you ever regret it?" Jake asked one evening as they were cooking dinner together. "Leaving your world for this one?" Zara looked up from the vegetables she was chopping. Her knife skills had gotten impressive over the months. "Never," she said without hesitation. "Do you regret letting me stay?" "Never," Jake echoed. And he meant it completely. They had developed routines that worked for both of them. Mornings were for individual activities. Jake would study while Zara worked on her online courses, or tended to the small garden she'd started on their balcony. Afternoons were for shared adventures, exploring the city, trying new foods, or just walking and talking. Evenings were for quiet time together, and nights were for the deep connection that kept them both healthy and happy. Jake had worried about how to explain Zara to his friends and family, but it turned out to be easier than he'd expected. He simply introduced her as someone special he met, someone who made him happy. People could see the change in him, how much more alive and confident he'd become. And that seemed to be enough. His parents had visited once, and his mother had pulled him aside to say, "I don't know what happened to you, honey, but you seem like a completely different person. Happier, more yourself, if that makes sense." It did make sense. Jake felt more like himself than he ever had before. One evening, as they were lying in bed talking, Zara brought up something that had been on both their minds. "Jake, I have been thinking about our future. What about it? We have built something beautiful together, just the two of us. But I wonder if we might want to share this happiness with others someday." Jake knew what she was hinting at. "You mean helping other people who are lonely?" "Yes, there are so many humans who suffer from the same emptiness you used to feel, and there might be others like me, wanderers who need a place to belong." Jake had been thinking about this too, like creating a community. Exactly. Not everyone needs the same kind of connection we have, but everyone needs some kind of connection. What if we could help people find that? Jake felt excited about the idea. We could start small. Maybe just invite a few people over for dinner sometimes. Show them what it feels like to be truly welcomed. And maybe we could teach others about real connection, about how to be present with each other, how to listen, how to care. "You know what?" Jake said, sitting up with enthusiasm. "I think we should do it. I think we should create the kind of place we both wish had existed when we were alone." Zara's eyes lit up. "Really, really? We have something amazing here, and it feels selfish to keep it all to ourselves." Over the following weeks, they started planning. They would keep their own special bond private, but they could create a space where people could experience genuine community. Jake suggested starting with his study group from school. a bunch of graduate students who were all too busy and stressed to have real friendships. The first dinner party was small, just 5 people total, but Jake and Zara created an atmosphere of warmth and acceptance. That was different from anything their guests had experienced. They asked real questions, listened to real answers, and made everyone feel valued and heard. How do you do that? One of Jake's classmates asked as the evening was winding down. Make everyone feel so included. Jake and Zara exchanged a look. We just try to pay attention to people, Jake said. Really pay attention. And we create space for everyone to be themselves. It's like you actually care about us as people, not just as study partners or whatever. Another friend said. We do care, Zara said simply. Everyone deserves to feel like they matter. After that first successful evening, word spread quickly. People started asking when the next dinner would be. Jake and Zara found themselves hosting gatherings every week, then twice a week. Their small apartment became a hub for people who were hungry for real connection. Some of their guests started hosting their own gatherings, copying the atmosphere of care and attention that Jake and Zara had created. A network of genuine community began to grow, with their relationship at the center of it all. Look what we built, Zara said one evening as they cleaned up after hosting 12 people for dinner. Look what you built, Jake corrected. This was your idea. No, this is what we built together. Neither of us could have done this alone. Jake looked around their apartment, still warm with the laughter and conversation of their friends. He thought about the lonely guy who used to live here, who used to think that isolation was just part of life. That person felt like a stranger now. I love our life, Jake said, wrapping his arms around Zara. I love our life too, she replied, leaning into his embrace. And I love that we're sharing it with others now. As they got ready for bed that night, Jake reflected on everything that had changed since that evening in the woods. He'd thought he was just helping a stranger, but he'd actually been saving himself. He'd thought he was giving up his independence, but he'd actually found freedom. He thought he was taking a risk, but he'd actually found the safest place in the world, in the heart of someone who truly understood him. Thank you, Jake whispered to Zara as they settled into bed together. For what? For crashing into my life, for teaching me what connection really means, for showing me that love isn't something that happens to you, it's something you build together. One day at a time, Zara smiled and took his hand, just like she had that very first night. Thank you for having the courage to say yes to something you didn't understand. As Jake drifted off to sleep, surrounded by the warmth of Zara's presence and the knowledge that tomorrow would bring new opportunities to share their happiness with others, he realized that some of the best things in life came disguised as the scariest things. Sometimes, the biggest risk was actually the safest choice you could make.